In this series of videos, I've gone through all sorts of combinations and possibilities based on a couple of simple shell voicings. And these could form the basis of a fairly extensive chord vocabulary for jazz guitar. Now, to finish up, I want to move on to a slightly more advanced concept. But this is something that flows very naturally from what we've already looked at. In fact, I've already mentioned this a few times, and that's to do with playing or not playing the root of the chord. I just want to give you a few pointers towards rootless voicings, because this is where things really start to get interesting. As soon as we extend the chord, we have the choice to leave out the root, and that will let us play with much more freedom. Let's go back to our original C9 chord, all arranged in order of pitch. That's C, E, G, B flat and D. Let's play that using a shape we've already seen. Now, if you're playing in a band with a bass player, keyboard player, another guitarist, for instance, you'll often want to play just the upper notes of the chord. The root of the chord is being taken care of, and it can get a bit muddy sounding if everyone's playing it. So that frees you up to explore these so-called upper extensions. So what happens when we remove the root of this chord? We're left with E, G, B flat and D. This makes an E minor 7 flat 5 or a E half diminished chord. Anyway, here's a really common voicing on the top 4 strings. You'll notice it's exactly the same as our C9 voicing with the bar across the top 3 strings, but without the bass note. Here's the tritone pair from C7, E and B flat on the 4th and 3rd strings. Here's the 9th on the 2nd string, the 5th up on the top string. Now you're effectively playing a chord substitution. You're playing E half diminished, which is basically C9 without the root. It's a rootless voicing. It provides lots of colour and interest, which a standard dominant chord won't give you. If I add the bass, obviously, altogether, it's a C9 chord. And if we do the same thing on a 6-string voicing, say G9, we'd have this. If we lose the root G, then we're left with B, D, F and A, which is B half diminished. And this shape is pretty near where we were for E half diminished a moment ago. And again, the tritone pair from G7 is up on the 3rd and 4th strings. Here's how this would work on a simple blues in G with a half diminished shape for every 9 chord. B half diminished for G9, E half diminished for C9, and then 2 frets higher to play F sharp half diminished for D9. 1, 2, or 1, 2, 3, 4. So now it's up to you to put the work in to memorize these 2 half diminished shapes on the top 4 strings. They're a really common way to create a more interesting guitar part. Half diminished shapes instead of plain old dominant chords. And what we're really doing here is rethinking or reimagining the chord up a third. G7 gets played as B minor 7 flat 5, which is what G9 minus the root really is. For a major 7 chord with a 9th added, we can do the same sort of thing. Here's C major 7, C, E, G and B. Now here's the D, the 9th. If we remove the root, we're left with this, E, G, B and D, which makes E minor 7. The idea then is that you would go to play a C major 7 chord, but you'd leave out the root, add the 9th, and then effectively you're playing an E minor 7 chord. Let's see this in action. Here's a straightforward C major 7 shell voicing. We can add the 9th here, and we could insert the 5th of the chord. If we ignore the root, we can play that 5th on the top string. So altogether it's like this. Now we're playing the 3rd, the 5th, the major 7 and the 9 of C major, which together make E minor 7. This is a totally standard E minor 7 shape and a great way to create a more colourful sound without the root for C major 7. Again, we're rethinking the chord as if it was starting on the 3rd. On a G major 7 chord, we can add the 9, which is an A, on the top string if we ditch the root. Now we actually have B minor 7. It's really G major 7 with a ninth added and the root removed. The result, as before, is that we've reimagined the chord based on the third. So, for major 7 chords, the reimagined version is a minor 7 shape that starts on the third of the original chord. We've got one more shape to look at, and that's the minor 7 chords. Here's A minor 7 then, with its root on the 6th string. If I add the 9, which is B, on the top string, it looks like this. But removing the root, I'm left with this. This is in fact a C major 7 chord. It makes a great substitution for A minor 7. Likewise for the 5th string version. Here's a D minor 7, and I can add both the 5 and the 9 on the top 2 strings, especially if I'm no longer playing the root. And that, D minor 9 without the root, actually makes F major 7. So that's just a quick taster of the world of rootless voicings. Find a simple jazz standard you like and know, something like blue bossa say or a blues, and experimenting with playing just the upper notes of the chord. Remember, a dominant 7 with a natural 9 added and the root removed makes a half diminished chord starting on the third of that dominant chord. So C9 becomes E minor 7 flat 5, for example, and a major 7 chord with likewise an added ninth and no root becomes a minor 7 starting on the third of that major 7 chord. C major 7 would become E minor 7. And a minor 7 chord with the same treatment becomes a major 7 a third higher. A minor 9 without the root is C major 7. And finally, let's remind ourselves what happened when we formed dominant chords with a flattened ninth. Remove the root and you have a fully diminished chord starting on the third. G7 flat 9 minus the root is B diminished, for example. So you now have all sorts of options to explore rootless voicings, and hopefully you're visualizing the way these extensions look and the way they sound on the guitar neck. Many thanks for watching, and leave a comment if there's something else you'd like to see, but for now, take care.